Hello, everyone. Hey, I just wanted to, I'm going to do a step-by-step tutorial walkthrough um, for your Module 1, Word Module 1, which is what we're working on this week. So the book is set up, basically they call them modules instead of chapters, but this is what you're looking for. And this is on page WD1, which is located down here at the bottom right here. But this is what it looks like. Notice that the pages are blue, and if you're in a different colored section, that means you're not in the correct place. So this book is pretty well laid out. Um, and for those of you who have never written a business letter before or set up a flyer document, this will be helpful for you. You will need to be able to do a letter of some sort, especially if you apply for a job of some sort. That is still a requirement for most positions is to have a cover letter, which is just a business letter introducing yourself to the prospective employer, along with a resume. I'm not going to get into the resume in this class, but we'll get into the tools, the formatting tools that you're going to need to become familiar with in order to be able to set up a resume. So if you can write a business letter, then that means to me that you're going to be able to create the resume. So I'm going to run you back to the class here. So if I take you to our class, and in our class, so this is what it's looking like. This is just for this particular semester, but it's usually pretty much the same. And we've got week 1 that's listed here. So we've done most of these things, and that's what was due yesterday. And I'm going to close that little tab there. I'm going to go to week 2. Week 2, this is pretty much the meat and potatoes, and the way most of the weeks in this semester, in this particular course for this semester, are going to be set up. So if you don't yet have the book, you can see that there is a PDF right here, Word Module 1 chapter scanned from the book, and it's going to look a little bit like that. And then beneath that, you can see that there's the objectives. So these objectives that are listed here are the exact same things that you're going to see on the left-hand side of the first page of each chapter. So you'll see those. I wouldn't recommend getting too crazy about that because some of the words might not actually mean anything to you, but you might want to go back after the fact and just see, once you've completed the assignment and the quiz, do they make sense to you then? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the Word tutorial module 1, upload 3 files required, pages WD1 through WD54. I'm trying to be complete with all of this so that you don't get confused. There's 3 items that you're going to create. One is called a Brooks letter, and you're going to build that one from scratch. There's no starter data file. The envelope also has no starter data file. So if you remember back last week, we downloaded those data files. Look at the previous links in our class for how to do that along with the video. And then lastly, there's the vinyl flyer. And this flyer, you will use a starter data file for that. So follow the instructions, and I'm going to step you through all of that in this particular video. So this is due, you can see, on September 6th, and I'm going to give you until September 20th to submit it late. And the reason, the rationale for that is this is not exactly, getting started can sometimes be a little tricky. Figuring things out, figuring out your internet, figuring out your computer, blah, blah, blah. So I'm trying to give you a little bit of a wiggle room there, but I expect your work to be done on Sunday, September 6th at 11:55 p.m. And so basically Sunday evening, close to midnight. So let's go back to this guy here. So we're pretty much focused on the book at this point. So I'm not going to constantly put these images up on your screen as I go through this, because I'm going to try to march through this as best I can. So we are working on, let me come back here, Module 1, and I'm going to move this aside. Maybe. Okay. And on our first page, you've got a bunch of things here. If I scroll down, you can see that there's some images at the bottom here. And what it's telling you is that the starting data files that you're going to need to create the module are the albums and the .jpg and the vinyl.docx. And if we go back to our computer and we look at this File Explorer, you'll remember that we downloaded these data files. And if you look in Word 1, you'll find that there is a module folder, just like they show in the image here. So if we go to the module folder for Word 1, you'll see that there are those two starter data files that they're referring to. And you could see that they also do that for others as well. So the review assignment, the case 1 there's none. Case 2, case 3, case 4. You're only responsible for the module and the review. So this particular video is specifically designed to cover the module. And that's these files that are located in the folder where I downloaded everything. Okay, so I'm just going to minimize that. We're going to flip over to the next page. And this is what this page is going to look like. So we've got a bunch of different green bubbles. I would highly recommend that you take a look at these green bubbles just so that you understand what each one of these terms refers to, because I'm going to call out these names and you're going to see that kind of repeatedly. I'm going to talk about ribbons, I'm going to talk about screen tips, show hide, all these different things. The zoom button, and they talk about these in the rest of the module. So I've moved over to page 4 at this point. And I'm going to start you down the road at this point. So what you should really understand is that the work in this class is specifically within the tan colored boxes for these modules, these tutorials that you're going to step through. The reviews are set up a little bit different, but they too might need you to go back to these tan colored boxes. So if we start off with step 1, start Microsoft Word. On the Windows taskbar, click the Start button and see what you come up with. See if we can follow the instructions. Click the All Apps, which is not how it's set up anymore. You're going to have to go to, some of you are going to have Microsoft. Some of you are going to have, whoops, wrong one. Sorry about that. But all of this doesn't really matter. So the way mine is installed is that Word is located right here. Well, I've already set it up on my computer, so it's down in the taskbar at the very bottom. But let's just forget all that. Let's click on the search option here. Some of you may actually show this by default, but if I type W-O-R-D into that search box at the very bottom, it comes up with Word. And I can do that this way every single time I start, or I can right click on it and I can choose to pin it to the taskbar, which is at the very bottom of your screen, or I can pin it to the start menu so that it automatically shows up at the top. So if you pin it to the taskbar, it's going to show up down here at the very bottom. So however it works is fine. You want to get to this screen though. So on this screen, this is where the meat and potatoes of this is going to happen. Okay, Let me make a little bit more room for myself here. So once we start Microsoft Word, you're going to be asked to click the blank document, and that's located here. So if we click on blank document, that's what shows up. Most of you have seen that before, not terribly difficult or challenging likely. And on page WD5, they're discussing the switch between touch and mouse modes. I would just tell you this. If you've got a touch mode computer, I would not use that for Microsoft Word. I don't think there's any value in that unless you have some sort of disability. But or you just want to learn how to use the touch mode. I really don't think that it's designed to maximize your efficiency with this. So just kind of keep that in mind. I would not use it. Turn it off. And the way you do that is you can turn it on by clicking on this little drop down here on the Customize Quick Access toolbar. If I click on Touch, it turns it into touch. I don't have a touch mode computer, but you can see that it's in touch mode now. And I can go back to mouse like that, or I can just turn that whole dang thing off. I would strongly recommend that you just turn that whole dang thing off. And that's how you do it. So if you're working on someone else's computer and they have touch turned on and you don't want it, that's where you go to turn that off. So I'm on page 6 now, WD6. We're going to set up the Word window to match the figures in the book. Okay, so it's going to look a little bit like this. Okay, so that's WD6. And for WD6, if we start off on step 1, we want to click on the Maximize button. And the Maximize and Minimize buttons are located right up here. So if you hover over top of these, it says Minimize, Restore Down, or Close. I would recommend that you just practice figuring those things out so that you're a little bit more skilled with that. I use them pretty frequently, but there's some other ways that you can avoid having to mess too much with that stuff. But that's really good information for you to have. Step 2 on page WD6, they want you to click on the View tab in the ribbon. Okay, so the ribbon is located at the top. And if you do not see the ribbon, I would come over here to the arrow, on my screen anyway. It's an arrow, and once I click on that, I can auto hide the ribbon. And that is terrifying for a lot of people. So if you look up here at the upper right, that button shows up again, and we want to have show tabs and commands. So if you get lost, if that so if we show the tabs but not the commands, that can be a little funky, but it gives you a little bit more screen real estate. But I think being able to see everything is the correct way to do this. Okay, so that's step 2. Step 3, once we're in the View tab in the ribbon, we want to click on the Show Hide, let's see, in the Show group right here. This is where we, oh, wait a minute. Not exactly what I was looking for here. Sorry about that, folks. Got a little distracted. So make sure you're clicked on the View tab in the ribbon here, and then make sure that your ruler is turned on. So if I click that, I'm going to see a ruler that shows up on the left and at the top. There's none at the right and there's none at the bottom because you've got them on the left and the top. So this is considered the ruler. If you look really closely at that, that refers to inches. So if you notice, we start off in -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and a half. So basically, you've got an 8.5-inch wide piece of paper. On the left-hand side, you're going to have an 11-inch piece of paper. So you can do the math. But these rulers are going to become pretty handy for you. If they're not turned on, you must make sure that they're turned on, or these instructions are really not going to make any sense to you. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to kind of fiddle around with the zoom. And down at the very bottom, you can see that there's a plus and a minus. This is a slider, so you can make it really small or really big. Somewhere in the middle is about 100%. And that's pretty much step 4. Step 4 in your assignment, talk a little bit about how to use the view and then the zoom that's listed up here. I would really not do this. This is just really clunky. You have to go find it, and the zoom down here at the bottom is really the tool that you want to use. So you can follow step 4, but I wouldn't spend too much time with it. Okay, just to the left of the zoom slider, you've got read mode, print layout, or web layout. We generally will be in print layout. So if you're in a different mode, you'll want to make sure that you're in print layout. And you can kind of see at the bottom of my screen that it's highlighted kind of in a light gray. All right, let's move to the bottom of page WD6. On the ribbon, they want you to click the Home tab. So Home tab is located right up here at the top left. And what we want to do is look for the backwards P symbol that's listed there in step 2. And once you find the backwards P symbol, you want to click one time on it. And once you do that, it turns into a light gray. And that's going to allow us to see the, well, it's going to tell you here, show paragraph marks and other hidden formatting symbols. So we'll need this so that we can continue to have our discussion about formatting these documents. So on page 7, we're going to save a document. So saving a document, it's going to look a little bit like this. Okay. So believe it or not, that little tiny image there is really what's called a floppy diskette. And I'm not sure that most of you even know what that is. But you can save a document by going up to the top of your screen, and notice that there's a little floppy diskette up there. If you click on that, it will take you to saving your document. So there's some other ways you can do this. You could click File and then Save. You can click on File, Save As. Since we haven't actually saved it yet, I would recommend clicking the File, Save button. And the reason is there's some changes that they've made here, and that once you click a document like this, it's going to present you with this particular box, and oftentimes by default it's going to send it out into the cloud. So don't use that one for now until you get a little bit more comfortable with where you're storing things. So click on File, and then we're going to click on Save As. And we want to pick the place where we're going to save this document. So these are the things that it's offering up as options for you, but really the one that you want to click on is the Browse button over here on the left. And the reason for that is that we want to go back to that little quick access option that we created in the very beginning, and we want to find our Word 1, and we want to find Module. And once we do that, you can see that it says file name doc1.docx. I'm going to highlight that. And if you look in the instructions, then it's telling you it's giving you on page 8 the file name to type in here. So I would recommend typing your initials first, and then typing the information that they have listed on step 4 in page WD8, which is Brooks letter, just like I have on my screen here. So the Brooks letter that should be the name that you incorporate into that file. And then once you've got that, step 5 on page WD8 says to save the document. So the reason that I kind of didn't follow the instructions precisely in those steps is that Microsoft has unfortunately made a lot of changes to how it stores or works with files. So you're going to have to be a little bit flexible. I'd pay attention to the book, I'd pay attention to my video, and probably somewhere in the middle you're going to have maybe the right move. Okay, so this is on page WD9. People skip the pictures, but don't skip the pictures because this picture is exactly what your letter should look like, except for the stationary portion at the top and perhaps the initials here at the bottom. Instead of AES, they're going to be your initials. But everything else is going to be fairly similar or identical. So you can refer back to this image if you have questions about is your document looking proper. Okay? So pay attention to that. That's not in a tan colored box, but those pictures speak 1,000 words. Okay, so bottom of page 10, we're going to insert a date. So step 1 on page WD10 says in your Microsoft Word document. So let's get to that, wherever my cursor is. Okay, so once I click in my document, you can see my backwards P shows up. There's nothing for you to delete. That just means there is a built-in paragraph mark that's going to show up. So follow the instructions and type in capital F-E-B-R, and then you notice there's a screen tip that shows up that says press enter to insert. And let's do that. So if you press the enter button, it automatically types in all that stuff. And then once you've got that finished, press the space bar and then type in 20, comma, space 2017. And then very carefully read the instructions on step 3, and it says press the enter key 2 times. Okay? So then you'll notice that I entered 2 paragraph marks. There was one that was already there, and then I entered 2 myself. And we will, oh yeah, there's one more thing. Those spaces now, they show up as dots in between those numbers, and that's what that indicates, is that those are invisible characters that you normally wouldn't see, but for sake of formatting, it's really important. And for those of you who are interested in putting 2 spaces in various places, do not do that unless you are specifically instructed. There's a reason for that, and we'll get to that eventually in the class. So on page 11, I'm on step 1 in the gray box or in the tan colored box, and it says to insert an inside address. Okay, so wherever we are, we're just going to type there, Jayla space Brooks. Press the enter key once, 2532, Brandywine Trail, enter key once, Wilmington, comma, space, capital, DE, space, 19802. Okay? And it also says in step 1, remember to press the enter key after you type the zip code. Okay? And then if you look at your options here, they say at the very last, here's what it should look like. So they're giving you a picture of how this whole thing should look. And notice how their paragraph marks show up. So just be certain that yours look exactly the same. This is really critical, especially this early in the class. So if you really just want to go off the rails and do your own thing, it may be difficult to complete the assignments properly in the class. So on step 12, they're going to give you a little bit more information here. So now they say, step 1, type dear space Jayla, colon, so that's 2 periods on top of one another, not the period and the comma beneath it. That's a semicolon. Colons have 2 periods, just like I have on my screen. And step 1 says, type dear Jayla, colon, press the enter key once to start a new paragraph for the body. And then step 2 says, enclosed, you will find my appraisal of your jazz and classical collection, period. And then press the space bar 1 time. Step 4 says type the following sentence. It's in the bold, including the period. I've included a price for each album. If I could type, comma, as well as a bid for the complete collection. Period. 1 period. And then on step 5 it says to press the save button. Again, there's a few different ways you can do it. You can come up here and you can press that button. You could press the Control and the S as in save key. Whatever works for you. Notice you're not being prompted anymore because you've already named your document, the Brooks letter, at the very top. But be sure to save your work periodically. I think that's a good habit to get into. There are some safeguards built into these apps, but you should not really rely on those. I mean, you could, but I wouldn't. Okay, so we've got the 2 sentences in the body, and they're asking us to type 1 more sentence, okay? So we're going to add 1 more sentence to this document, and it's on step 1 at the bottom of page 12, okay? And it says, if you have any questions, comma, you can contact me at Via Rio Records at cengage.com, period. And then press the enter key just 1 time. 1 time. Now, what happened was the text that you just entered for the Via Rio Records at cengage.com turned into a hyperlink. And it's in blue, and if you hover over top of it, it says to do some stuff. We don't want to do this because this is going to be a printed letter on a piece of paper. So I'm going to right-click that, and I'm going to choose Remove the Hyperlink. And what that does is just takes away the hyperlink and puts it back to black text. Now, we're going to go back to the instructions and move over to page 13. And if you notice, there's a picture on page 13. It's going to look something like this. And it's giving you the what's called an image of what we just did, the contextual menu. And that's what that does for you. So right-clicking on your document can sometimes be a really helpful thing because it gives you the most likely tools that you're going to be using, and many applications do that. Okay, so I'm at the bottom of page 13. It says to change the word complete, press the arrow key up arrow key once, and then press the right arrow key as necessary to move the insertion point to the left of the C in the word complete. So the left of the C in the word complete. So you can use the arrow keys to kind of monkey around in here. So there's our word complete. Okay, so that's the one that we're working on. And then we want to be to the left of the C in complete. Okay, so I'm blinking to the left of the C in complete. Come back to your instructions and flip over to page 14. Just a few steps here. Cat wants in, give me a second. Okay, so what they're asking us to do now is on step 4 or page 14. I'm on step 2. And they say to press and hold the control key and press the delete key to press and hold the control key. Oops. Make sure I'm in the right spot. Left of the word C. Press the control key and then press the delete key on your keyboard. So not the backspace key, but the delete key. And when I do that, you can see that the word complete goes away entirely. Now they want us to type right where we're at, entire, and then press the space key. But after the guy decides that he's like, oh no, I don't really want to do that. I want it to be the way it was. So if you come up to the top, there's two little circular arrows. We want the one that goes to the left that says undo typing. It also says Control plus Z. So if I undo it, it removes the word that I just typed. And if I do that one more time, it replaces it with the way it was prior to that motion. So it's almost like you've got the ability to go back in time, essentially, is what they're talking about. So spend a little, you might want to pause this video and just make sure that you understand how those buttons actually work. Because there's a redo button as well. And what you can do is come back here to your document, and so you can redo. so it's like you're kind of going around in circles, but you can use entire or complete. I don't really care which one you use in your letter, but I do want you to know how to use the redo and undo buttons. I use the undo button every day, all the time. Yeah, it's a trick that I use frequently. All right, so once you've got that set up, we want to click on the control key and then the end key on your keyboard. And what that'll do is it'll take you all the way to the very bottom of your document. So if you're working on a laptop, it might be a little bit tricky if you don't have a full-size keyboard, those sort of things. So just kind of keep that in mind. You'll want to become more familiar with the computer that you're using so that you understand its limitations. And some of those little tips and tricks are located down here in figure 1.9. This is not really the class for memorizing keyboard shortcuts. I'm mostly wanting you to begin paying attention to things that you otherwise might not have. And so on page 15, we're going to kind of motor past that. I'm skipping down to step 1 on page 15, and it's going to look a little bit like this. Okay, so you can see that bold text coming up. That's something that we need to do. So type the following sentence, including the errors shown here. So we're going to go to our document, make sure we're on the very last line, lowercase as we discussed, comma, I did not include prices, 2 I's in that, for you. For your, excuse me, Brazilian jazz albums, because TEHVYNIL was in such poor shape. Period. Everything else is in excellent condition, period. All right, so that's kind of how that's supposed to look, something like that. Well, your computer did some changing as you typed, and that's the autocorrect. Um, you can read through that easily yourself, but you'll notice on my screen now that there's some red underlines. Depending upon how your autocorrect works, everyone seems to be a little bit different, and I think I might have missed a word. I don't know, whatever. It doesn't really matter. Don't get too caught up with this. What you're really interested in, does it actually make sense? So we're going to look at how to make those changes now. So to correct the spelling and grammar errors, right-click on UR, U period apostrophe RE, and display the shortcut. So that's step 1 on page 16. And if we go back to our, so here's the document. I'm going to right-click on it, and it's not giving me anything. So you can see that my spell check is, or my grammar check is actually a little bit different, or perhaps not even turned on. So I'm going to have to fix that one myself and get rid of the E, because it needs to be your. And then you want to look at the word vinyl, make sure that's spelled properly. Mine got changed already, or I spelled it properly accidentally. And look through the rest of it and make sure you don't see any colored letters. Okay, so it looks like Brazilian shows up, and it's giving me a option to change that. It looks like I may not have spelled it properly, not really sure. I'm just going to click on that and just make sure that it's there's no more colored underlines under there. So I'm going to read that out loud. As we discussed, comma, I did not include prices for your Brazilian jazz albums because the vinyl was in such poor shape, period. Everything else is in excellent condition. That looks pretty good to me. So the editing process when you're working with Word could be, it could be tricky, or it could be exactly the way that you like it. If you're working on a lot of different computers that are not your own, you might end up having to do a little bit more checking and changing than you would on your own computer. Okay, so on step 1 on page 17, you can do the control and end key thing, or you can just make sure that you're at the very bottom of your document. So we want to be at the end of that, everything else is in excellent condition line, and we want to make sure it has one paragraph mark listed there. And we want to type the word sincerely yours, comma. And then it says on step 3, I'm sorry, press the enter key 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And that's for your signature. And then we want to type the person's name. So Leo Baranov. He's the one who would sign it. Step 4 says to press the enter key once. And then you'll see that we're going to, step 5, type your first, middle, and last initial in lowercase. So there's my first, middle, and last initial in lowercase. And I'm going to press the enter key. Oh, look what happened. So my initial got changed into a capital M. Well, I don't want that. So if I come back up to the undo button, the last thing gets changed back to the way I typed it. So it's lowercase mrh. Lastly, we want to type enclosure, just like this. Then take a look at your book and the picture at the bottom of page 17. So that's how things should look. Something like that. And I'm thinking mine's about like that. I'm just double checking. I'm not radio silence. I'm just trying to make sure everything looks correct. And I think it does. I don't see any wiggly lines except for my initials. And if I right click on those, you know, there's you could add it to the dictionary, but don't get too caught up with making the squiggly lines go away, because once you send this to somebody else, their dictionary is probably going to be different than yours, and the squiggly lines are probably still going to show up. So don't get too crazy with that stuff. But again, it says on step 8 to save the document. All right, so I've already reviewed my document, and I'm going to save it. So I can click up here, save, or I could press the control. Okay, so on page 18, it gives you some steps here in the tan color boxes about checking and trying to find any red squiggles that you could go with. And you can see that mine doesn't really have any. So if you have some on yours, you can right click and you can choose to ignore them to make the little squiggles go away. You can add them to your dictionary. I'm not terribly concerned about that because it seems like some of those skills are from days gone by. You will notice, however, that the autocorrect, spell check, various different tools, they operate not very nicely compared to your cell phones. So just be sure to remember that this is not your cell phone. So if you're relying on it to do some of those changes, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Just be kind of cautious about that. It's a mindset that might get you into a little bit of trouble. Anyway, this is the look of the document in the book. This is my document, not in the book. And so let's flip or go down to the bottom of page 19. And it's talking about adjusting the paragraph spacing in the inside address and after your initials. So read that again. Adjust the paragraph spacing in the inside address and after your initials. Okay, so let's do this. So what we want to do is we want to move the mouse pointer in step 1 in the white space just to the left of Jayla Brooks. And you can see that it's a it's a right facing arrow maybe. See that? So if it's not, click on something in your document and then just to the left, you can see it flips, goes from the kind of vertical bar there to the right-facing hollow white arrow. I'm going to click and hold my mouse with the left mouse button, and I want to highlight just the first 2 lines, not everything, just Jayla Brooks and the 2531, and then let go. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of the white space in between Jayla and the 2531 and the 2531 in Wilmington. So we've highlighted those things. And now if we come over to the paragraph group in the Home tab, so paragraph group is there, Home tab is here. If you don't see paragraph, make sure that Home tab is selected, then locate paragraph. And then just above paragraph, you'll see line and paragraph spacing, and there's a little arrow to the right of it. And we want to choose to remove the space after the paragraph marks for those 2 lines. And if you notice in the background, you can see when I hover over top of remove space, it actually shrinks those 2 lines. And now the 3 lines appear as though they are much, much closer together. That's your inside address. That's called the inside address. And that is precisely the way it should look. If you flip over to page 20, you'll see, again, a little bit of information that shows you exactly what I just did. Now, on page 21, we're going to do it a little bit differently at the bottom. So we want to click to the right of the V in Baranov. So to the right of the V in Baranov. And we want to press the Shift plus, so press and hold the Shift key, and then keep it held down, and then press the Enter key. And what it does is it gives you a manual line break. So you can see there's like a left-facing arrow that kind of goes down and around. And now your insertion point is just below Leo Baranov, and you're going to type the word purchasing space manager, just like that. Okay, we're not done yet, but we're close. So the last thing we need to do is we need to pull these two lines a little bit closer together by removing the space in between, because you'll notice how Leo and purchasing manager seem to go together because they're much closer together. So skip down, let's look at the bottom of page 21. Okay, it says to save your work. Let's see if it gives us the, maybe I missed it already. So it looks like I missed step 7 on page 20. Okay, so that's page 20. Step 7 says to double click your initials to select them and the paragraph beyond them, and then to do the same thing. So let's just do that. So we're going to double click the paragraph mark and the initials. So I've got, we can do the same thing. We can get the right facing arrow, get that whole entire line selected, come up to the line and paragraph spacing, and then remove the space after the paragraph. So those things get a little bit closer together. So that's good. Sorry about that. It slipped me. Okay, so now on page 22, you can see that there's a list of methods for selecting text. I'm not going to get too crazy about that. I don't really use a lot of those tools. I think some people do, some people don't. I think majority of the people are using a mouse to do those sorts of selections. If you find yourself doing something repeatedly, you might want to refer to those shortcuts on page 22. So now we want to change the zoom level for this page, and I'm on page 23. And if you go to the View tab in the ribbon up here and click on it, you'll see that you get some options for, you'll get some options for one page, multiple page. You've got those zoom levels there. If you click on one page, it automatically changes, if you look down at the bottom right, your view to 47%. You can't really read this, and that's fine. It doesn't matter. For editing purposes, sometimes you don't need to read the text as much as you need to see how things are going to look. Now, one thing that we did not talk about was on that first image in the very beginning of the chapter, it showed that stationary, and I said, oh, well, you won't have that on your document. And the reason is, for many of you, you'll work with organizations that have stationary. Stationary refers to pieces of paper that are, mostly blank, but at the very top, they might have like a logo or something else listed on them. And I think that's pretty typical, but if you weren't going to use any stationery, you might choose to make some yourself anyway. And I do that sometimes. I don't have a need for lots of stationery, so I'll just make it myself. I just add it into the document. We're not going to do that here. We're just going to leave it blank. But what we need to do is adjust the margins. So if we go to the Layout tab on the ribbon, at the very top, make sure you've got something that looks like this. And in the Page Setup group on the left-hand side, we're looking for margins. So if you click on margins, you'll see all these different options that are going to show up. and you'll see last, blah, 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 lots of different things. So on page 24, if you go down to the bottom, they want us to click custom margins. Okay, so go to your margins, click on custom at the very bottom, and once you've done that, the top margin, so it's already highlighted here, is going to be 2.5. You don't need to put the double quotes in there or anything like that. Okay, and then let's see what else they're going to have us do. It says to click the OK button at the very bottom. And once we do that, it shifts everything down, so there's a whole bunch of white space at the very top. And that's exactly what we want to do. So if you like the look of your document, and it seems like it's the way it should appear, you can preview it. But sometimes people get a little freaked out and spooked because of this show hide paragraph marks. So if I turn them off, that's what the document is actually going to look like if it's printed. And if I turn them back on, you can still see those little marks. But if I come over to File, Print, print here, and now I get a preview of what it's going to look like. I would not recommend printing documents for preview purposes. I would begin to get a little better at using the tools that are built into these applications. But the first time, just to give you some comfort, you might actually want to find a printer and print those things off. I do not need anything printed for me. So if you're going to print things and try to give them to me, I don't want that. I only want electronic documents. Okay, so back to the book. Okay, so on page 26, there's a picture of what that preview is going to look like and what yours should look like. And on step 1 at the bottom, it says to click the back button. So this is the back button at the very top of your Backstage view. So if you come and click the back and click on File, and now if we click on Close, I don't use this very often, but we do want to save our work. Okay? Microsoft Word is still running, but we don't have any documents open at this point. And at the bottom of page 26, it talks about creating an envelope. So if you look on page 27, that's where the first step is located. So we're going to click on File tab, and then we want to go to New. Okay? And then the next step is down on, we're going to click blank document, and then we're going to save our document as Gomez envelope. Okay, so blank document. We're going to choose File. We're going to choose Save As. We're going to go to Browse, and we're going to put that right next to that other document, which is going to be Word 1 module. And you can see there's our MRH Brooks letter, but this time they want us to call it the Gomez envelope. In the Gomez envelope, we'll choose Save, and then that shows up at the very top of our screen. If you go back to your instructions on page 27, in the bottom of page 27, it says to click on the ribbon at the top and find the Mailings tab. Whoops, I don't know why all these things are popping up. On the ribbon, click the Mailings tab, which is located right here. And then in the Create group, on the very left-hand side, you're going to create envelopes. Now, I have to be honest, I don't make envelopes anymore. I'm almost always creating labels and then sticking them on envelopes. But this is actually interesting little simple tiny little trick here. So we're going to omit the return address here. And we're in the delivery address section. All right, let's see what they want you to type in there. If you go to page 28, on page 28 it says to type in Alexis Gomez, enter 6549 West 16th Street, return Wilmington, comma, DE 19806. Okay, so I've already clicked the omit the return address. If you wanted to type a return address in there, you could. We're not going to have one because in this case the envelope is already pre-printed as well. Okay, so it's asking, and you can kind of see the image there at the bottom. Looks like this. So this is what yours should be looking like. And if I move that out of the way, it's pretty much what it does. And then scrolling down a little bit further, click the Add to Document button. So if we come back, and here's the Add to Document button. Okay, so now we have an envelope that looks pretty good. And yeah, that's great. Okay. So it says add to document button. Dialog box closes. You return to the document window. The envelope is inserted at the top of your document with 1.0 line spacing. So it brought those things together. And if we flip over to page 29, it says save the document. And then click File, and then click Close. And we're done with that file. Save, File, Close. We are done with that section of, or session 1.1 of Word Module 1. Okay, so then just a preview, look ahead, we're going to be formatting a flyer, which is going to look something like that in this next section. So stay tuned for more of that.